Good afternoon, folks. Hope you're good. I'm Jack Chew. This is Chewing It Over, and we're back. We only had a brief interruption purely because the clinic internet was misbehaving, and so I had a bit of downtime. So I doubt you've missed me. I've certainly missed you, and it's nice to get back stuck into doing this. I've got some really cool episodes coming up with some brilliant guests. Joe Elphiston and Joe Turner are joining me shortly, as is Ash James from the CSP. We're going to do a piece on AI as they've got some new guidance out, which is really cool. But before we do that, I wanted to jump on because I had a bit of a I want to say interaction, but it's not really an interaction on LinkedIn. Just that was interesting, and I want to talk you through it because I think it's quite telling of the industry and also of something that I think we need to talk about more, or at the very least, not hide from. And so I will get stuck straight into it. So I want to show you a little bit about something that happened on LinkedIn. So I've got some images here. I better slide over here, shouldn't I? Slide over here and read it to you. It's a bit weird, isn't it? But I can get out of the way of the image. There's an elephant in the treatment room. So I'll read it for those that are not watching, but on audio as well on the podcast. So someone's posted on LinkedIn. I'll explain who, and that is relevant in a moment. But there's an elephant in the treatment room. Insurers are undermining and undervaluing quality physiotherapy providers across the UK. At 6, our mantra is don't treat, cure. So just to give you some clarity, this is someone from 6. When they say at 6, they don't mean 6 o'clock. 6 is the name of the physio company. I'll come to that in a minute. Our mantra is don't treat, cure. And it's a commitment to not just patching people up, but making a long-lasting positive impact on their lives. As someone invested in getting people functionally better, not just temporarily relieved, the persistent undervaluation of high-quality physiotherapy by private medical insurance companies is a problem that needs addressing. It's not just a matter of fairness, it's a direct threat to the standards of patient care expect and deserve. As it stands, it's a race to the bottom. So I'll just pause for a second. There's lots to like, isn't there? You can imagine me saying that on Chewing It Over, and I have many times, as others have. So yeah, this is all very exciting, isn't it? You can imagine I'm giddy to jump on this bandwagon and celebrate this truth teller. The costs of running clinics and the real impact on inflation, particularly over the past 5 years, is undeniable. This isn't sustainable. From a patient's perspective, when clinics are financially squeezed, the quality of care inevitably suffers. That might mean shorter appointments, less experienced therapists, or a focus on quick fixes rather than addressing the root cause. We won't be doing that at 6. So before I bring the other image on, I just want to go back up to the top a second, and I should have given a bit of a sidebar. Insurers are undermining and undervaluing quality physiotherapy providers across the UK. Absolutely reasonable opinion, but an opinion that is essentially then implying that is the thing rather than a thing, and we will come back to that in a second. But let me pull this one up as well. This is following on the same post. I don't think that is really the value proposition anyone wants. The lack of appropriate compensation isn't just frustrating for us on the ground, it's economically short-sighted. There's a mutually beneficial opportunity for collaboration. High-quality physio reduces the need for medication, imaging, and often surgery. It gets people back to work, back to living fuller lives faster, and it's ultimately a cost-effective solution all round. Quality physiotherapy isn't just an expense. I see it as an intelligent investment in better patient outcomes and a key part of a more efficient healthcare system. We need a realistic reassessment of reimbursement rates that reflect the true value and expertise of high-quality physiotherapy delivers. It isn't new news, unfortunately. The current trajectory isn't just unfair, it's illogical and ultimately detrimental to the patients we all aim to serve. Increasingly, patients, whether they have insurance or not, will need to pay to access the high-quality physio service they require. I'm sure you could get a haircut in London for £5 somewhere, but I don't think it would be worth it. So, again, you can imagine, all good points. And, what's not to like? I sort of wish I was the sort of person that could just clap along to that and celebrate it and repost it and invite them on the show. But I couldn't. I was a bit, it miffed me a bit, not because of the substance of it, which is fundamentally true, but the context matters. And so, yeah, little me. I had to pipe up, and I'll show you what I said. I'll lean over again. I'm going to have to read this to you as well. So I then said, I can't remember how soon afterwards, I then said, Eddie, sorry to be a buzzkill of what is unfortunately true-ish post, but you do realise that you work for Six Physio, which is owned by Ascenti, which is owned by BDC, which is owned by two engineers turned venture capitalists who are unlikely to give a shit about MSK care standards. We won't be doing that at Six, I quote, you will if you're told to. Also, if you don't yet, you're holding on to a premium product made premium by private medical insurers and providers like Ascenti, making routine care barely functional. Anyway, rant over for now. Your cute LinkedIn post probably didn't deserve all of my ire, but it got on my tits. I'm sorry. Good news is that it has inspired me to make some more content on the various causes of the care quality issue that I sense you and I agree on. And here I am. Well, obviously, this is not exactly the content I would have planned without this post, but yeah, it made me realize, look, I need to talk about this more because quite short-sighted, unidimensional analyses like this might emerge, and so yeah, we definitely need to talk about it more. So, obviously, a fairly provocative and confrontational post from me, and this is the thing that's worth me just unpacking. So the original post was from this lad, Eddie Smith. I don't know him, and I can't remember if this is my screenshot or someone sent it to me because they sent me the post afterwards. It's one of those comments whereby people then send you a load of text messages saying, "Oh, this is spicy. Thanks for saying this," or whatever, or "Can't believe you said this." So anyway, the elephant in the treatment room post was from Eddie Smith, who is the managing director at Six Physio, who are a company I've known for a long time and admire. I know Matt Todman less well, but certainly Rupert Crowfoot, someone that I've interacted with and I had on our show a number of times, and someone that, it's like, I really like Six Physio. But, and also I then mentioned in that LinkedIn reply, don't I, about how they are now owned by a stream of people, of which then ends up being essentially commercial venture capitalists that then probably it's there's always a risk of me looking like some raving commie who's got this massive problem with corporate ownership or something like that, when fundamentally I think there is something to be said for the fact that chain is relevant. But the big thing that I want to unpack a little bit more of, and the main irritation that I have, is fundamentally within that chain and directly owning and running Six Physio now, is that they're now owned by Ascenti, who, for various reasons, are responsible in part for what Eddie's describing. And so I'm sympathetic to what he's describing, but it just ends up being a situation where I look on and I'm just sort of frustrated at the fact that someone in his position, right? I wouldn't be doing this if it was some random associate at Six had posted that. It'd be like, that's what the sort of thing you'd celebrate, right? Or sort of someone who's just in clinical practice frustrated that are speaking out and stuff. There'd be something brave to that. But in a position of leadership at Six Physio, you're kind of in a position where I'm like, well, I'd rather you weren't essentially virtue signaling on LinkedIn, and you could probably just speak to your boss. Get someone on the phone, get the guys who actually own your clinic to say, maybe we should not degrade standards for a bit. How about that? Shall we do that as a bit of a treat for the industry? So, for those that don't know, Ascenti, this is from the Ascenti's website. If you don't know them, they're a company that operates both NHS practice, NHS sort of commissioned services, as well as then they have private clinics. I don't know if they do pay as you go as well, but it's just, essentially they bid for business. So from their website, again, I keep forgetting that people aren't necessarily always seeing this. So I'm just pulled up something from the website. Philosophy and values. We are passionate believers in our distinct clinical philosophy because we know it works and see firsthand how it helps people every day. Our knowledge comes from over 25 years of successfully treating more than 1.5 million people, from office workers to top athletes. I'll just pause for a second. For them to be referencing 25 years, they have not been trading as Ascenti for 25 years, but it's interesting that they want to name that, and if they're willing to name 25 years, they're clearly proud of their entire past, of which I'll come to in a second. Our philosophy: Ascenti physiotherapists take a results-oriented approach to treatment, combining hands-on techniques with cognitive strategies and progressive digital health services. They then repeat themselves for some reason. This means using manual therapies such as soft tissue massage alongside cognitive therapies that address how the mind and lifestyle factors can influence your physical well-being. Okay. interesting there. I don't understand why someone describing hands-on techniques and cognitive therapies, right? It's a big jump there. Obviously, a big rehab advocate as I am, right? I think you probably should do some functional rehab there, or some at least physical exposure to activity. Which I don't know, you do some manual therapies and then cognitive therapies. It's like persuade them that you're okay, and hopefully they'll go forth and do the functional rehab that might get them better themselves. I don't know, but anyway, I'll nitpick. That's needless. But it was worth me just showing you who they are and what they're doing. So 25 years. 25 years they've been in the game. You might not have heard of Ascenti from 25 years ago. You might have heard of them now. They're big fish, massive company, and you know, good on them. They've grown. I've no real problem with that. You might know of them from their previous names. So there's a lad called Neil who started it out. I don't think he's on the scene anymore. I think he retired, but back in Birmingham, from what I recall, and some of my mates worked for them in the early iterations of this. At first glance, you're thinking, why is the two companies of the same name at the bottom? But look, he spelt his name wrong at the start there. So then quickly became Physio World. You might have heard of Physio World, 2006 to 2015. I think they were then acquired, or maybe even just a name change. And though for 3 years they were then trading as TICS, which was the Injury Care Clinic, I think, or clinics. So TICS. So these are the previous company names of Ascenti. They were Physio World, then they were TICS, then they became Ascenti. And so they reference in 25 years. I think my maths are right in that they're kind of casting it back from the different iterations of the company, right? So that's Ascenti. Who operate physiotherapy practice across the country, as far as I'm aware. And so they have MSK clinics and services. They're commissioned for NHS business, but they also do occupational health work. They'll then they'll get a tender for some whiplash care with an insurer, or they will then see patients that are insured with various different private medical insurers, right? Bupa, AXA, etc., Aviva. I think I don't know for sure that they're who. I think, you know, I'm pretty sure I've been on their website recently, haven't I? So it's like they're with all major insurers, is what they say. And so I'd be surprised if the ones I've just named aren't true as well. But one of the things that's really relevant here is that Ascenti, this is on the scoop that I managed to get from doing some really, you know, sharp journalistic digging, due diligence that I did by going to Ascenti.com. Ascenti partners with Bupa. So, and you know, this was pretty big news last year. And Ascenti has launched a new strategic partnership with leading health insurance provider Bupa. This partnership provides Bupa members with access to Ascenti's network of directly employed physiotherapists, right? So Bupa and Ascenti have done a deal. It's often known as vertical integration. I don't know if that's perfect phrasing of that, but essentially that then Ascenti physios using a combination, I think, of PhysioLine, which is their direct phone-based telephone triage type service. Kevin Doyle quoted here. He's their chief commercial officer at Ascenti. I remember him from Physio World days, so he's still in the biz. We are delighted to partner with Bupa and provide their members with rapid access to high-quality musculoskeletal care. So this is interesting. So Bupa members are being provided high-quality care, musculoskeletal care, from Ascenti, according to Kevin here. So unless Eddie was not mentioning, you know, our mate Eddie was he not meaning Bupa? He could have not been meaning Bupa, right? And a lot of Bupa patients are seeing Ascenti, right? So is Eddie referring to a drawback in standards that come from the private medical insurers driving prices down? A lot of them are then seeing Ascenti, right? So is it poor quality, Eddie's opinion, which I share, or is it what Kevin's describing over here when Ascenti do this landmark deal with Bupa to see a load of their patients? I don't know. This seems like a difference of opinion here, right? And that happens across the businesses, right? Across the industry, right? Differences of opinion. I love it, right? It's a debate. We do all sorts of debates and stuff like this. It's exactly what Physio Matters is about. I absolutely love it. I love nothing more than a debate. However, the interesting thing about this is these are essentially colleagues. In order for that difference of opinion to occur and to have that out, right? For someone to say, I think that these standards are being dragged, which I agree with, right? By the private medical insurers, which I agree with. They're certainly contributing significantly to that and driving it down. But then the person who in part is responsible for the service that person runs, so Eddie says this, Ascenti owns 6, Ascenti's chief exec. He's responsible for Six. It's well integrated like that. These aren't separate entities in any clean fashion at all on a corporate governance level. The day to day, may well be. I've no idea. I've no idea, and I doubt that there's, like any business, especially of that size, it's going to be so intricately and intimately intertwined. But it's just on a commercial level they are, and so then that difference of opinion that we're describing, which literally can't, it's not like there's an in-between on this. That's an interesting dispute that essentially is between two people. Then they could have that chat, couldn't they? They could probably get stuck into that and think, right, well, might we not do the degrading standards thing? Shall we not do that for a bit? As I mentioned earlier. So I'm just setting the scene on why little old me reads that on LinkedIn, nodding along, thinking, yep, of course, yep, fair play. And then it just irked me to then realize that that's the sort of message that you could put on an internal email to provoke a boardroom conversation with some of the people that, by your own analysis, really are doing just what you're describing, right? Some of the worst offenders. Now, it could well be that Eddie just doesn't consider them the worst offenders. It'd be interesting, right? He might feel that Bupa and Ascenti in partnership are actually, it's nothing to do with them, right? I'd be intrigued. It'd be really interesting. I feel like I need some detail then, because by speaking about private medical insurers writ large, right, it means that you then, your big ones are fairly well known: Bupa, AXA, Vitality, Aviva. And it could be that he's not meaning them. I think you probably want to be a bit more precise. So I think it's reasonable to assume, although I'm looking forward to clarity, that Bupa would be involved in that. And in fact, it would be probably a bit negligent for him to not mention, of course, I don't mean Bupa, right? So I imagine they probably means Bupa, not Bupa, are then certainly vulnerable to this sort of critique, because they pay very little for fees, right? It's sort of well known for that. We certainly don't see them in our clinic, and many others are sort of moving away from that because they underpay, and it's not great, but I sort of understand it, and those be market forces, and it's a challenging thing. And so essentially, many clinics that are premium are going cash paid. Now, really challenging, and I really feel for Six and others in London. When I speak to business owners in London, it's just like that's the amount of people that are insured through their workplaces and stuff like that mean that then they would just be going to they would always be going through their insurance, and so to then cut off private medical insurers is more tricky in those central clinics that are doing massive volume. So I think that is really interesting and really challenging. But I think that's where I'm just explaining where some of my assumptions have come from. That when I read that from Eddie, of which I'm nodding along to, I can so understand it. The thing that really irritates me is primarily what I'm describing. I needn't repeat myself, right? Is that essentially the team of which you're part of, especially as your managing director of Six, whether he's directly reportable or whatever, but it's just that they are at one with Ascenti sufficiently for that to be intertwined in terms of corporate governance, at least comfortably, means that then that conversation is an internal memo and email. That's a beef that I agree with that could easily be taken up. And imagine the influence it potentially could have, having that opinion, right? There's an elephant in the room. You're in that room. This isn't. It needn't be doing the social commentary thing, okay? Which fair play to you, and you're doing as well. But it's just like, just have that, you think to have that chat. Now, the second thing is then where I am a bit more torn, and we're going to make some more content about this in coming months, really, is this idea that then as there's massive amounts of mergers and acquisitions going on, it's really tricky, because I do think there is a circumstance where standards are being in part degraded because you're getting more and more layers in which more and more margin it gets squeezed. I think that then stacking it high is going to be something that does compromise care quality. But I also know the market enough and know that absolutely many people, including many friends of mine, deserve brilliant exits. And if they get a valuation on their business and want to sell, then I am super proud of them and their massive inspirations and stuff like that, many of which have been on this show and we collaborate with. And so it's not like I'm saying this out of any sort of bitterness. I don't have any skin in this game. I'm not in clinical competition with any of these people or companies. And it's not as if I'm sort of in this situation where I just think that, like, essentially pull on the thread and follow the money, and therefore you just see nothing but like what immorality. It's not my point. I think that to some extent, when it comes to talking about who we really care, it's like at the end of the day, is that you will eventually do as you're told, and that's the bit that was a bit aggro from me, wasn't it? If you just pull up my reply again, I think the bit that was probably more snarky than I needed to be was when I quoted him saying, "We won't be doing that at 6," and I said, "You will if you're told to," which is a bit. I don't like myself for that. That were a bit too sassy, even by my taste. So I sort of I can't say. I was going to say I take it back. I don't take it back because I did mean it, and I still do mean it because I think fundamentally I do. But it's unnecessarily aggro. Bearing in mind I don't know this person. I have absolutely no problems with this person. In fact, I'm describing the fact that I agree with him in principle. So that was unnecessary. But what I'm getting at there and saying in too sassier terms is that, are we suggesting that BD Capital it might imply that Ascenti need to do something, and Ascenti suggest that actually Six Physio needs to deliver this particular type of care model, or that they're literally anything to do with their structures? Whilst you'd hope that those people wouldn't micromanage Eddie and his team. Fundamentally, I know what it's like to have ownership and control and power in that way, and it's just so unlikely that when Eddie says with his full chest, "We will not be doing that," and it's just like, just where did he get those assurances? And if he got them from Ascenti, then he could have a word with them about this beef, couldn't he? It's like, so which is it? It feels like I was frustrated because it felt like he was having his cake and eating it too, and so. You're posting something like that for some of the fandom that would naturally come from it, and because clearly I have no reason to believe that he doesn't believe what he's saying. This is the bit that got annoying, and why I am doing this now is probably not what would have happened if it wasn't for this next bit, which is that he then didn't engage. No, I'm not owed a reply by anyone, right? But he deleted the comment, left the post up, blocked me on LinkedIn, and then just hoped. Well, I assume it hoped I'd go away. A bit ambitious, really, because this is sort of my job, right? Weirdly, compared to most people, I do this sort of commentary piece, and Physio Matters now for 12 years has done exactly this. And then I think a friend of ours, Sue Julian, had posted not long afterwards, after mine had been deleted, and posted something on there which was again sort of critical of the fact that then some of the hypocrisy that I've mentioned, and then her post was deleted. Whether she was blocked or not, I don't know. I haven't spoken to Sue, but I just know that was happening, and partly because people were texting me this and sort of giving me, watching this unfold. And so there was nothing else then done or said, right? It was just like, right, I posted a bit on saying like, this is what not to do, and I'll be making some content about this. I didn't speak specific. I didn't reference this specifically. I was just meaning that essentially it's not cool. And all it's done is he sort of flared me up to make sure I sort of tell the story, because I think it's important, and I think it's important that for two reasons. One is that I think it's a useful thing to talk about as a topic, but then also, if you're gonna put something like that up, elephant in the room, right? It's designed and framed as being like the thing that people don't talk about. So then when people want to talk about it, they just happen to disagree with you, and they point out some quite awkward thing for me to have to say to him, is that you've still got to front it up. If you're in leadership, right? That's the nature of it. You can't hide away. You can't be a coward. The difference between what you think and what you say, especially saying publicly, is sometimes diplomacy. Sometimes you'd like to say something, but you think it's diplomatically unsound for you to do so. So sometimes that's the difference. But sometimes the difference between what you say, but what you think and what you say publicly is just cowardice. And those things are hard to tell apart sometimes, including inside yourself, right? So you want to say something, you want to own something you've said, you could be thinking like diplomatically, that's probably not wise to say it, but it could be that you're deciding that actually I'd rather say it, should be said, it would be useful to say it, but I'd rather not. And that applies to me as well, right here. I could absolutely, and many would argue I should have absolutely, have thought it and not said it, because for diplomatic reasons that would be smart, right? I have absolutely no major axe to grind here. As I've mentioned before, a massive amount of time for Six, particularly its founders and the work it's doing. I have absolutely no hard feelings and don't know this lad Eddie from Adam. But it's also something that, as I certainly felt that way. I've expressed it in a post, and so I share that as a means of partly that's part of my work, part of my job, and also why I have my independence as a means of being able to say such things. So then, deleting it, blocking, not engaging, and essentially hiding. A few days have passed and certainly not heard anything, and I'm fairly accessible, aren't I? So that was a shame. And I think we need to make sure that we kind of don't make that a precedent. So that's one of the things that makes me then look at this, and why I kind of created this is partly to tell you a bit about what happened, to explain my feelings about that side of the market. Is that absolutely you will find few people that don't want to shake their fist at the private medical insurers, namely sort of Bupa, AXA, Aviva. I'm probably missing some that are then driving down prices and essentially would want to pay for my care and time and my team's care and time at half the price that would be on the cash rate, because they're then doing it in bulk or whatever, and then not appropriately negotiating and such. That it's frustrating and just drive down standards in the ways that Eddie's described it. I should talk about that, and I do talk about that. But then for that to be the only analysis, is that part of that analysis is the people that are then delivering that care and are dragging prices down and are willing to see people for a tenner. He's alluding to that. You could get a haircut for a £5 in London, I'm sure. He's just meaning like there's people that are willing to do that, be that individuals and companies. Are we implying that they are just not, they've got no skin in the game? They've got no agency as individuals, and the individual clinician, that's harsh, isn't it, if they're employed to do a job? But the services or the companies that are doing those deals. So are we suggesting that they're irrelevant to it, right? They're just if we've got to feel sorry for the providers, and it's actually all the insurers. It takes two to tango in that, based on the same logic. So it felt like it'd be stupid of me to not create this, to explain myself, my opinion on that, what had happened, as well as then, and it's worth me saying, LinkedIn, all social media platforms have their upsides and downsides. And LinkedIn skews sycophantic, right? It has this tempo to it where it's sort of a virtual signaling machine, particularly when it comes to, say, business or corporate content. And there's certain things that can be said for that will bait the right reactions and emojis. And as I said, I see, I like the point, but I think, God, it just feels hypocritical, and someone having their cake and eating it too, for it to have come from where it did. And then unfortunately the reaction by not engaging at all, or not engaging with it. I really do not mind. I had better things to do anyway. I'm kind of glad they didn't in some ways, but delete it, blocking me, and just crossing the fingers that it all went away is frustrating. So part of the outcome of why I wanted to do this is because we want to, as I often talk about, decrease virtue signaling, particularly on LinkedIn, and the sycophantic nature in which people will ham up that side of the industry. We need more awareness of a fuller context of these sorts of things, right? It's not just us finding our favorite beating stick that becomes socially appropriate to talk about. Like, for example, the elephant in the room was easier to talk about that part of the elephant, wasn't it, for Eddie? Whereas if you had a Bupa, might want to make a similar point. I mean, hopefully they'd have the sense to keep their heads down. But if Head of Bupa wanted to make that point and started to rail against Ascenti, then it would be interesting, wouldn't it? And so you've got this situation where we need the full context, and for leaders to be aware of that. And if you are aware of it, you'd have the sense to not just keep your head down, but also recognize that the better places for you to lobby for change like that. And then finally is that if you end up caught in this sort of situation, be that not just with me, but particularly with someone that wants to engage and has a point, and granted, I've admitted that there was some sassiness to how I made it, but it wasn't that outrageous, and it's still an opinion I hold, then engage with it somehow, find a way, don't hide, and don't be a coward. I think it's a shame when people, particularly people in leadership, will just be pissy enough to behave like that. I don't think it's useful, and so we need to make that consequential. And so here I am explaining what happened. Now, this might be a bit of an airing of dirty laundry. I think it's not always, it might be a bit uncouth for me to do so, but I think it's an important topic. I think this is important stuff that we all need to be better at. And so as I come up to my half an hour mark there, I'm going to leave it. thank you so much. Tune in for Tuning It Over in the next couple of weeks with Ash James, Joe Alfreston, and Joe Turner. We've got some brilliant interviews coming, and you won't have to deal with just me doing piece to camera and pictures for half an hour. But yeah, hope that's been useful. Great to be back on Tuning It Over, and we will be back weekly from now. Thanks to those that tuned in this week to our pelvic health masterclass. Hundreds of you scaring me that it was going to stay up on the internet and whether we'd got enough bandwidth, which is amazing after all these years for us to still be running masterclass events and still me being worried that too many of you have turned up. That's a good problem to have. And so thank you for that. Such a brilliant, engaged community. So do check out the links, because if you attended that or you are a Physio Matters member, then get onto the library and have a little look, because all of that has been updated and all the links have gone out for you to get the content that you can then obviously have on demand from now. So anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. Love to hear from you on this. I've had to pre-record this and post it out because the live stream just didn't tick over there. So I'm just going to post this out. So any comments on here or feel free to email info@physio-matters.com if you'd prefer. I'd love to hear from you on this, especially including if you feel like I've been bang out of order with it, or especially if there's some inaccuracies. Really, apologies if there's any factual inaccuracies on this, or if you feel like I'm actually missing the fuller context and stuff. I'd be gutted if that was the case, because I want us to be more thorough. All right, thanks all, and see you next week. Cheers.